Hello to all of you, and thank you again so much for tuning in to Never Thirst Again. My name is Chrissy Smith, and I am so grateful that you have decided to join me for today. I'm actually really excited to be back because on last week I was feeling a little under the weather, and to be honest, you can probably still hear just a little bit of that nasal voice that just kind of carried over into today. But I am so happy to be back. It's always just really refreshing whenever I can come on here and share with you guys. So, before I begin with you all today, let me just say that for those of you who may be looking for Never Thirst Again on other podcast platforms, there are actually several of which I will be listing them in the description of this episode as I did with the last one. But I do want to reiterate just a few more of them. And I did want to give a quick shout out. So you can absolutely find me on Amazon Music, which would be on www.amazon.com/, Never Thirst Again. You can also look me up on Spotify, Pandora, and of course, the others that I will list again in the description of this podcast. Now that we've gotten that important stuff taken care of, let's get started. So, I actually wanted to share this episode a few days ago just because I had the opportunity to chat with what happened to be a random stranger. You might notice in a few of my other podcasts, I talk a lot about coming in contact with strangers because I do feel like we can learn so much from other people. But while in the middle of having this conversation, we started talking about service and what that looks like when we serve other people. It's funny, but everyone likes to use Chick fil A as a prime example of what proper service and professionalism looks like. But what about just the other people in regular situations that happen to go unnoticed? We all serve others in some way, shape, or form. I don't think we really realize what kind of impact it has on those people, whether they're around us on a regular basis or not. Now, that actually brings me to a story that I wanted to share with you. A few years ago, just right when my husband and I had gotten married, I remember we went down to visit my grandmother for a little while. I don't know about the rest of you, but with me being born and raised in the South, having a huge traditional Sunday dinner was something that we did every single Sunday after church. All of us would gather at my grandparents' house, and by all of us, I mean aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, you name it, they were there. And those were just the good days that you can think back on and just reflect about the wonderful, sweet memories. Now that my cousins and I have all grown up and we've had our own families, some of those traditions have dwindled a little bit, which is a little unfortunate, but thankfully they've not completely disappeared. Anywho, I digress. I remember one weekend in particular. Kelvin and I drove down to visit our families, both of which happened to be from the same little small town of Manning, South Carolina. We had gone to church that morning, and then we drove right on over to my grandmother's house afterwards. We talked and laughed for a bit with her and just listened to her talk about the good old days. You know how that goes. Well, in the middle of the conversation, she made it a point to say, "The two of y'all ain't eat nothing yet. Chrissy Tail, go on in the kitchen and fix some plates for y'all." Now, just so you know, my grandmother is from a completely different time and generation. As of this moment, she's 96 years old. And all she knows are those traditional roles of husbands going out to work and wives taking care of the home. The other thing is this: when your elders tell you to do something, whether it be big or small, there aren't any questions asked. You just do it, right? So I got up, I went into the kitchen to fix some food for us. I grabbed two of the paper plates that were usually reserved for children and whomever else wanted to use one. Well, my grandmother must have either sensed that something was amiss, or she must have just been watching me from where she was sitting while I was in the kitchen. That being said, she decided to walk up behind me and she asked, "Darling, who's that plate for?" "Well, this one is for Kelvin. I haven't fixed mine yet," I told her. With that, she looked at me and said, "For Kelvin? No, 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 baby, no. That's a man. You can't put his food in a paper plate. Grab one of them real plates from the cupboard." Meanwhile, she must have seen the puzzled look on my face because she said, "Go on now." So I did as she had instructed me to, because at that point it was a command, not really a question. So I did it. I grabbed the plate, I put his food in there, and I still put mine in a regular paper plate. Now, after we ate our food, and Kelvin decided to go outside to stand around and talk about football, weather, and whatever else men like to congregate and talk about, I stayed in with my grandmother chatting for a bit longer. While we had that alone time together, she looked around the room to make sure no one else was around before she proceeded to speak. Then she took her beautiful old wrinkled hands and placed them on top of mine. "Baby, do you know why I told you to put Kelvin's food in a real plate instead of that paper plate you had before?" she asked me in just that manner. "I think so, but I'd rather you tell me why," I said, teasing her just a little bit. "You see, baby, when you're serving somebody, especially if it's the man you love, you want to always give him your best. Doing that shows that you love and respect him in a way that only a wife can. It's a way of showing honor through service to your husband. You understand what I'm telling you, child?" I understood. I stared back at her in those gray eyes that sunk so deeply in their sockets before shaking my head and giving her a very soft, "Yes, ma'am. I understand what you're saying." "Good," she said. "And can I tell you a secret?" she added on top of that. "Of course." I looked back at her ever so intently. "When God sees that you took the time to love on your husband like that, He'll make sure that your husband gives you that same love in return. And that will last for a lifetime. You hear?" I answered back, "Yes, ma'am. I hear you, and I promise I'll do just that." So, with a warm embrace and a sweet kiss on the cheek, we both said, "I love you," and continued to chat for a little bit longer. Now, I know that some of you probably hear this story, and believe me, I've prepared myself for some of the flack that comes from people saying things like, "Oh my goodness, you just sent us back to the 50s by being subservient and docile. Who still fixes a plate of food and actually brings it to the table for their husband?" Well, I do. However, for those of you who might have missed the point, my fixing his dinner and bringing it to him is no different from the way that he draws me a warm bath at the end of the day so that I can relax, or no different from him picking up things that I requested on his other list of errands that he has to run. And yes, There are times when He also fixes me a plate of food as well. But listen, this really has absolutely nothing to do with fixing food. This is about being selfless and serving others with wholeness and love. Many times our minds are set on wanting to receive love, but we sometimes miss the mark when it comes to giving or showing love to other people. One of the ways we can do this is by making people feel as if they are so important to you. Simply telling someone that they're important is one thing, but actually being able to show them that is another. Our actions count for so much when we're presenting a kind of service to someone, whether it be big or small. This is why Jesus taught so much on the idea of what humility looks like and what that's supposed to feel like. Come to think of it, in today's culture, so many people deem that unnecessary. However, I agree with my beautiful and wise grandmother, who's been serving others well since she was just a child. She was the one that her mother looked to make sure that all the other siblings were well taken care of after she died. She served her siblings well. She married my grandfather and had 13 children of her own. And not only did she serve her home well, but she served the people in the community. She served the people in the church. And yes, on many occasions, I have seen her service to strangers. Her version of serving well meant simply putting others before herself, taking time to give her best, even when it seemed like an interruption of her time and her schedule was what she did. So today, as we focus on making time and space for other people to be served by us, let us remember that bringing someone a glass of water or taking the time to visit a nursing home and just having a conversation with one of the elderly patients should not be viewed as an inconvenience to our schedules or even as an interruption of the way that we would normally do things. This is a way that God has created an opportunity for you to humbly serve others the way that Jesus did. Think of it like this. Suppose a stranger had been walking for days with no food, no water, and no clean clothes. He knocks on your door and asks if he could come in from the cold because he's freezing, he's shivering. You invite him in, and he doesn't tell you that he's hungry. He doesn't tell you that he's thirsty or even reveals that he has holes in the bottom of his shoes. You, on the other hand, have a hot pot of soup on the stove, a trunk full of clean, warm clothes that no longer fit, and a warm, crackling fire going strong in the fireplace. Do you simply allow the stranger to come in and sit by the fire? Or do you offer him soup and warm clothes to put on, along with getting warmed by that fire? Give others your absolute best. It's okay to go above and beyond because God smiles on that. And there's always a blessing in this. Do you understand? Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm so happy that I was able to share this story of servitude with you, and I hope that it lingers in your hearts for a long time. But before I let you go, though, this is just another gentle reminder for all of you to make sure that you subscribe to Never Thirst Again through Amazon Music at www.amazon.com/Never Thirst Again. Also, you can find me on Spotify, Podbean, and several other platforms. Again, those of which I will list in the description of this episode. Thank you again for tuning in. God bless and take care.